Mary Cassatt was one of the few female Impressionists, and the only American painter who was fully recognized as an Impressionist. She was born near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1844 to a wealthy family, which allowed her to pursue her interests with greater ease than the typical working-class woman. This included frequent international travel, wherein she was exposed to European art, as well as her attendance at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. In the 1860s and 70s, Cassatt started sending her paintings to the Paris salons and saw success there, including the acceptance of her painting The Mandolin Player. And yet, not unlike her future Impressionist contemporaries, Cassatt grew bored with the traditional salon style and began experimenting with the Impressionist style she saw in Degas' work during one of her trips to Paris. In 1879, she was invited to exhibit with the Impressionists for the first time in the fourth Impressionist exhibition to date, where she showed Woman in a Lodge with a Pearl Necklace, or Lydia in a Lodge. Although she achieved high praise in Paris, when she had her painting exhibited in America, it left critics unimpressed, pushing her to stay in Paris with other like-minded artists. A few years before her Impressionist exhibition debut, Edgar Degas had begun to be a fan of Cassatt's work, and the two of them would go on to form a lifelong friendship, which included numerous exchanges of letters and art. In 1877, Cassatt painted Little Girl in a Blue Armchair, for whom Degas provided the model and even painted a small portion of the background himself. This painting is widely considered her first real Impressionist painting and was formative in Cassatt's exploration of female subjects and the private moments within home spaces. She also shows great concern with capturing the personality of her subject, which she would continue to strive for throughout her work. It was Degas who gave Cassatt an official invitation to the Impressionist Club, and by default, she became yet another American artist working outside of the U.S., such as John Singer Sargent. Although Cassatt had been rejected in her home country, she was proudly American and proud of the American naivete that stood out in her work. On one occasion, she stated, "I am American, clearly and frankly American." It was also Degas who further encouraged Cassatt to focus on people, breaking with the other Impressionist direction of plein air landscape. She never fully abandoned plein air painting, however, her greater delight tended towards her figures. Although they had quite different temperaments, Degas the cynic and Cassatt the good-natured, Degas also said that he believed they had identical dispositions of a reserved rationality that helped them remain mutually beneficial friends. In 1882, there was deep unrest in the Impressionist group, resulting in a temporary split in which Cassatt was forced to join the group of defectors from an exhibition that was to be held due to her loyalty to Degas. Even more devastating, her sister Lydia passed away during this time, sending the Cassatt family into a state of despondency. The Impressionist group would not be fully reconciled until the death of Manet brought them back together once again. And yet, the diminishing freshness of the movement allowed Cassatt to become more relaxed with her compatriots, getting to know them and their families more personally outside of the chaos of the art circle. Cassatt would also retreat to Spain during this time to recuperate, and did not really begin working again until 1885, at which time Durand Ruel would involve her in yet another Paris Impressionist exhibition, as well as an ambitious New York Impressionist exhibition. In the 1880s, Cassatt began her series of mother and child paintings, which became a signature of hers due to its frequency in her work, along with other paintings of the unseen lives of women. Degas even proclaimed her later painting, Mother and Child, or The Oval Mirror, to be the greatest painting of the 19th century, in part due to the nuance of texture Cassatt achieved in the figure's skin and the use of symbolist technique to turn the ordinary into the religious. A year previously, Cassatt had painted Louise nursing her child, which was a subversion of the male gaze on motherhood, showing her commitment to creating her own voice in the field. Unlike other mother and child paintings, such as Renoir's A Woman Nursing a Child, the face of Louise is turned from the viewer, casting all attention on the child itself, the apple of the mother's eye. This subtle demonstration of the child's value through the mother's eye shifts the perspective of the viewer from the outsider to the inside heart of the mother. Although Cassatt never had children of her own, her proximity to women allowed her to understand the mother-child relationship in a way that her male peers could not. She had already began exploring these new, exclusively female spaces in her work, such as The Tea, which shows two elegant and affluent ladies in a salon. And yet it isn't their fine clothes or the setting that draws the viewer in. It is Cassatt's attention to the personality of her figures during a moment of relaxation in the bustle of modern Parisian life. One of the women still has her gloves on, as if she just stepped off the street, and their casual posture gives the picture a delightfully candid nature. She was also unconcerned with painting classically beautiful women and enjoyed not relying on natural beauty to create monumental work, such as the figures in her painting Young Woman Picking Fruit. Another huge influence on Cassatt's work were the Japanese woodcut prints that inspired a whole host of other Impressionists as well. She especially loved the prints of the artist Utamaro, which she saw for the first time in an exhibition at the Beaux Arts that she and Degas attended together. From there, Cassatt did a series of dry point etchings, including The Bath, which shows both Japanese influence as well as her fascination with mothers and their children. After this, she painted the Child's Bath, which seems to be a natural evolution of her integration of the print style, including bold patterns and outlining. Although many Impressionists were inspired by the prints, Cassatt and Degas' unique use of black may have been one element of inspiration that the others did not share. They both agreed in the necessity of black to create depth in certain paintings, as well as the bold effect it would give a piece. The swath of black cloth in Cassatt's portrait of her mother is a clear example of that effect. Perhaps the most tremendous creation of Cassatt's that uses Japanese ideas of composition was, of course, her painting The Boating Party. One of her largest paintings, The Boating Party, sees a use of bold colors and layered composition, artfully concealing certain aspects of the scenes to create depth, just like the prints. And the diagonal lines of the oars and the man's arm draw the eye into the mother and child, whose delicacy creates a stark contrast against the sharp angles. We also see the use of black once again in the shadow of the man's attire. Cassatt also greatly enjoyed the work of Holbein, a Renaissance court painter, and the way in which he would flatten his background to accentuate the three-dimensionality of his portraits. Her painting, Breakfast in Bed, shows the use of that effect in the juxtaposition between the flat surfaces of deep greens around the figures and the attention paid to the rolling forms of the pillows and the layered rendering of the skin. It is also yet another beautiful mother and child portrait, offering a tender glimpse into a lazy family morning. Cassatt's continual use of children in her paintings displays her patience as a painter, working with subjects who couldn't sit still for her in the way that other models could. Cassatt's love of children and action can be seen in her earlier work, Picking Flowers in a Field, which is personally one of my favorites of her paintings. The rendering is delicate, but sketchy in a fashion Cassatt enjoyed in some of her smaller, less finished paintings. These are more reminiscent of a Morisot method of rendering that leaves the viewer with a sense of spontaneity and ease. Cassatt was about 50 years old when she finally had a retrospective exhibition of her work in Paris, taking place at Durand Ruel's. It was symbolic of the respect that she had earned in the Impressionist circle and was favored by Parisian art critics. Although Cassatt was quite an active and respected member of the Impressionists, her Americanism mixed with the French style often leaves her work cast aside in the greater Impressionist canon, and curators often struggle on whether to put her in the American or European section. Cassatt's womanhood and attention to female subjects also didn't help her gain notoriety in the years after her death. And yet, her legacy lives on, and with the push by art historians to revisit those artists who were relegated to the edges of the canon, no doubt the impact of her work will live on as well.